I'm Marisa Smucker, Executive Director of Mennonite Mission Network, and this is the second panel discussion in our Here with Purpose webinar series, and the second one to discuss immigration. In our first discussion, we heard stories of immigration experiences at the U.S.-Mexico border, told by Mission Network staff and service program alumni that witnessed them. Today's conversation centers on what God is doing in Calais, France, and how Mission Network workers and volunteers are joining to give shelter and support to migrants who are passing through. People that Joseph and Rachel Givens, Mission Network workers in Calais, refer to as people on the move. Stories of suffering, injustice, and death are hard to hear, knowing that we all are God's children and created equally in God's very image. It is not difficult to encounter stories of inhumanity. They are one scroll or click away. It is difficult, however, to not become callous to these stories, to hand wave them away and looking for some reason that suffering in a particular situation was justified. Mission Network does not highlight difficult stories to make you feel bad or to guilt you into action or belief. We share stories of hardship because they are places where God is. And where God is, there is hope. There is healing. And there is a call for the church to be present. At the end of the conversation, I'll join you again for some questions for self-reflection. If you are watching this as part of a small group, feel free to use these questions to prompt discussion. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start off with some introductions here, beginning with myself. I'm Lane Miller. I'm co-regional director of Europe and Africa, especially its French-speaking regions. So that means I oversee the work of the Givens in Calais, which is going to be the focus of our conversation today. So let's just go around the room. Joseph and Rachel, why don't you guys introduce yourselves first?
I'm Joseph Givens, and I've been working in Calais at the Maria Skobtsova House for about 2.5 years now. It's a space where we provide a safe shelter for women and children from the community of people on the move here in Calais.
And I'm Rachel Givens, and we're here with our 2 children, Elijah and Micaiah.
Barbara?
I'm Barbara West. I'm in Corvallis, Oregon right now, but I've had the pleasure of working with Joseph and Rachel in Calais at the Maria Skobtsova House. Kathy and I were there a year ago, and then I was there for a few weeks last September, and we're very much looking forward to being back there in about a month and a half.
Kathy?
And I'm Kathy Howell, Corvallis, Oregon, and have been in Calais working with the Givens last March and April, and looking forward to a repeat of that.
The Givens work in Calais, France is one of the many partners and missions that Mennonite Mission Network supports. We exist as an organization to lead and mobilize and equip the church to participate in the holistic witness of Jesus Christ. So that means creating service opportunities for people on long and short-term bases. The Givens are in Calais long-term, and both Barbara and Kathy were there working short-term. But also it means that we partner with all kinds of organizations around the world with whom we don't have any workers. Mennonite Mission Network doesn't choose projects and execute them on its own. We have these deep relationships, especially in Europe and Africa, and at the request of partners, we look for workers who might fit their needs. And so in this particular case, Joseph and Rachel's assignment stems out of a long-term connection with the UK Anabaptist Network that works with migrant issues in the UK. And they also partner with an organization across the English Channel in Calais, France, that works with the ongoing migrant crisis in Europe. So I'm going to let Joseph and Rachel tell you more about that. They're going to describe their ministry, a bit of its history, and the context that they're working with there in France.
We work at the Maria Skobtsova House, which is a safe house for women and children from the population of people on the move here in Calais, France. The house was established around the time that the big refugee camp in Calais was demolished in 2016. And over the course of time, the population of people who were coming through Calais shifted from being exclusively or almost exclusively men to being having a large number of women also coming through Calais. They're still a minority, but there are a good number of women who come through, and oftentimes women with children. And so at the Maria Skobtsova House, we decided to open the house as a safe space for the women and children who are in those situations, because the camps can be incredibly dangerous for women, especially single women and women with children, because human trafficking is an issue, violence is an issue, a lot of other problems exist that are kind of unique to the situation for women and children. And so they come to the house. We work with the Refugee Women's Center, who goes to the different camps. They're a mobile team, and they assess the needs of the variety of women that they meet. And if they meet someone that they think is particularly vulnerable, they will call us and ask if we have space to welcome this person. We have a maximum of 12 people that we can welcome at the house. And so so the spaces are very valuable. So we try to use them the best way that we can. But when the women come to the house, there's no specific time limit placed on them. They're welcome to stay as long as they need to. The only stipulation for us is that they are not planning to stay in France, because if they want to claim asylum in France, there are better ways to do that and faster ways to do that. And so, so they can come, they can stay as long as they need to. And while they're there, we provide all of the basic necessities and food and clothes and things like that for them. We also seek to be a prayerful presence in Calais. So we have regular Christian prayer times. It's predominantly or overtly Christian house, which is a little different from other safe houses that do this kind of work. Everybody is welcome to join us for our prayer times, but nobody is required to. It's not a requirement to stay in the house. And so, sometimes we'll have volunteers and guests join us for prayers. And those are always beautiful moments, no matter who happens to be there.
Rachel, could you speak to kind of the demographic of folks that you have coming? Where are they from? What are their ages? What is their background? Where are they coming from?
Yeah, and that's really ebbed and flowed over the years. We've had people as far away as Vietnam. Just recently, we've had a newer group from Sierra Leone here in Calais. But the consistent ones are Eritrea, Ethiopia, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and I'm sure I'm missing plenty of other countries.
But with that kind of diversity, what does the kind of day-to-day look like a little bit in the house?
Varies so much. So I've kind of taken it upon myself as the grocery shopper. So at least once a week, I do our really big grocery trip. And that sounds intimidating, but there's also the layer of never knowing who you're shopping for that week. I mean, you kind of know whether people will be coming or going based on the weather, but you don't really know. For example, we thought this week we'd have some women and children, but we do not. So we bought lots of extra milk to have for kids, but we don't have kids. So it will get used. But so there's the layer of deciding what to get and which type, and based on which country people come from too, changes what we buy. In Eritrea, Ethiopia, a tomato sauce with lots of onions and a very special spice called Burberry is very common, as well as injera. So having lots of flour and onions and tomatoes on hand is essential. Whereas in like Iran, it's more eggplants and veggies and tomatoes and rice. So there's a very, very specific thought process that goes into groceries each week. On top of that, we're constantly playing and entertaining with kids who are there. We also navigate and help facilitate many conversations that happen around the house based on guests that are there, based on things that are happening in Calais, trainings, and things like that.
Barbara and Kathy, I want to ask you both what kind of inspired or galvanized you to be interested in volunteering over in Calais, and to give me a little brief description of what you each were doing. So why don't we start with you, Kathy?
The opportunity, when it appeared in my email, was something that caught my attention as a place where we here in the U.S. a lot about immigration at our southern border, but the opportunity to be in a place and to live in community with folks on the move and to be a witness to their journey and stories, with our only responsibilities as it were to pray in the house and to be present with folks and to spend time with them and to be in relationship for however long that might be. The opportunity for it to be in France had its appeals too, as a different cultural context to what was happening in the house as well.
Barbara, how did you get involved?
Kathy got that email, and it seemed kind of like fate. We've been looking for an international service opportunity, but didn't want to intrude on any situations. And I was a French literature major in college, and it would be fun to practice French again. I didn't think about it ahead of time, but when we were preparing to leave for Calais a year ago, I was doing ongoing 12-step work, and I happened to be on step 11, which is about, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God, and thy will, not mine, be done. And so it turned out that going to Calais and participating in the life of Maria Skobtsova House was a daily exercise in that. I didn't have to try to do my step work. I was just living it there, because our own powerlessness is clear every day, just as the people on the move are powerless over their circumstances. And trying to impose my will on any part of the situation didn't work. And so thy will, not mine, be done. I was just reminded of that moment to moment, and it was very spiritually helpful for me.
What were your kind of day-to-day activities? I mean, what did the real texture of your daily life look like as a volunteer, but also where you saw spirituality springing up in the midst of that? Barbara kind of beautifully illustrated the contingency of the situation there, but if you have some stories to illustrate that, what might some of those be?
I'll leave the story to Barbara, and I can give you the blow-by-blow, maybe of the daily activities. A typical day at Maria Skobtsova House is not typical. You don't know what you're going to find. When we were there in March and April, and it was our first time to be volunteers in that space. And Rachel and Joseph were communicating to us that this was kind of a unique time at the house, and the guests had been there for a long time, some of them many months, because of the weather had been bad. And so they were comfortable with kind of the routines and each other, and we were new to the situation. But at the time we were there were 2 5-year-olds and 2 7-year-olds, and a house full of folks, like I said, who had been there for a while. And so our daily activities often were connected to the children, and we spent wonderful times trying to give them space outside of the house and space to themselves, because it was cabin fever, I guess would be one way to describe the situation. And so it was wonderful for us to be able to explore Calais with these children in tow much of the time. So, of course, there was laundry to help encourage folks to move through the system. And we looked forward every day to the evening meal as a community meal, and the women cooked that meal, and we shared that together. And that was a special part of the day. And then the prayer time was also a regular part of the day. And sometimes it was just a desperate, I don't know what else to do. Let's have prayer time part of the day. And the children were always quickly caught on to what was happening and valued it. And for us, singing and songs were an important part of that time as well. And Barbara and I reflected and tried to think of songs. I've always said that one of the reasons I go to church is to come home with an earworm, a song that's stuck in my head that will encourage me and come to me when I need it. And so we reflected on songs that might work that way for the children. And it was a blessing to us when we would be out at the top of the lighthouse and one of the children would be singing some version of a song we'd sung at prayer time, and to know that they were taking that gift with them from their time at the house was yeah, rich and meaningful.
Kathy's entrusted me with a story, so again, I come back to prayer time, because again, in 12-step work, I'm constantly, for years trying to establish a prayer practice in my life. And so it's kind of miraculous to land in Maria Skobtsova House and be living a prayer practice in that way. And and just to follow up with what Kathy said about desperation, I mean, ideally, there's a nice little kind of quiet prayer session in the morning before breakfast, but there are so many days we weren't able to pull that off. And I remember clearly the day when we had a teenager in the house who was an amazing artist, and one of her drawings got destroyed, and we didn't know what had happened, but she was in a rage. There was just a chaos and crisis in the house. And then I think we realized, oh, we haven't had prayer time yet. Let's pray, because we literally didn't know what else to do. And then I think also of the times when the weather report is favorable, waves are less than half a meter. There's maybe a 6 or 7 hour window of the channel being calm. And so many of the guests in the house will leave in the evening. It's when they are able to board on these inflatable rafts. And so that next morning prayer time, the house may be empty and you don't know what's happened. And there's a beautiful song from Taizé that's in the little books and booklets that we have. It's in German. Bleibet her und wacket mit mir. My German's terrible, but it's watching and waiting, watching and waiting. And you realize somebody wrote that song for us. Like, we have so much hope that the women might be successful in crossing, as they've been trying to do for months or years. And then bottom line, we just hope that they survive the night, whether they end up on this side of the channel or not. And you realize that the thing to do in that moment is pray.
Joseph or Rachel, could one of you give us a little description about what the migrant journey looks like when folks get to France? Why exactly are they in Calais, and what comes next for them?
Most of the time, the people will have come to Calais through a variety of different paths across Europe. Most of the time, these people who end up in Calais have the goal, the ultimate goal, of going and crossing to the United Kingdom. The governments of Britain and France have decided to work together to ensure that there are no safe and legal routes for people who want to claim asylum in the UK to cross to the UK and claim asylum. And so what that has done is it's created this illicit gray market or black market of human trafficking, of smugglers. And so when people get to Calais, essentially they're kind of trapped and cut off on their journey by 20 kilometers of water. That's how far it is across the channel from Calais to the UK. We're the closest point on mainland Europe to England. And so that's why people come here. And so what they do when they get here is they will find a smuggler to work with. They will pay that smuggler sometimes upwards of 3,000 euros per person, which is pretty close to $3,000. And that smuggler, along with his network, sometimes they call them the mafia, which is a very accurate description of this market, will provide them with a raft, kind of an inflatable small boat, which is meant to hold 30 or 40 people, and a motor. And they will, when the weather is good, the waves are low and the wind is low, which is not often in the winter, but more often in the summer. The smugglers will call the people and they will say, meet me here at this location at this time. And so the people have to then leave from the Maria Skobtsova house or wherever they happen to be and go take a train or a bus or whatever to get to the place where they were told to meet, where they will be, sometimes they'll wait in the water up to their necks while the boat leaves from the shore and comes across the water to pick them up, and they'll climb in. And then they get in this raft built for 30 or 40 people, and sometimes now they're putting over 100 people in these boats, and they will make their way out into the channel, assuming all goes well, and anywhere from 3 to 8 hours later, they'll land on the shores of Dover in the UK. It doesn't always go that way. Often the police will show up. We have, in fact, had many women tell us stories about how they have been treated with tear gas, with women having their children have tear gas sprayed at them. The police will take out their knives and they will stab the rafts that people are in. A variety of different things like this, incredibly violent and difficult things. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what people are dealing with in their attempt to get to the UK. Okay, Rachel wants to add something quick, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's important too is just the reason of people coming through. We've seen a lot of people recently who have spent many years in other European countries, some up to 10 to 15 years. Their children have been born there, speak that language as their mother language, basically, and have been told, no, your asylum's been denied. Now you have to leave the country after being there 10 years and their life is there now. And so that is one of the big reasons people are going to the UK. There's a much higher chance that their asylum claim will be accepted, will be given a favorable response. And so therefore, it makes the most sense for many people to go to the UK.
Barbara and Kathy, I'm curious that when you got to the Maria Skobtsova house, what was surprising to you? You knew what the work was. I'm sure you were aware of the context, but kind of what touched you the most, when you were there. And the answer to this question might be the same, but what has stuck with you as you're back in your life in Oregon? When does this come into your consciousness? So I'm asking really, what are those sort of key moments on which your experience turned?
The biggest surprise for me was the joy of the women and the children. I mean, children, I guess you expect to have joy in moments. Certainly there's stress, but there's not a day that goes by that there's not some joyful moment. And, birthdays and holidays are celebrated lavishly with dancing and singing and the sense of humor of the women. I mean, how they'll tell me to lighten up when I'm getting too, nose to the grind with the laundry or whatever it is. And they'll be like, Barbara, you need to take it easy, or. So it's just an amazing example to have people be actively practicing joy and humor in these circumstances. And so, kind of the corollary, what I bring home from that, I mean, when you've been living with women who've been trying to find the smallest possible backpack they can find and choosing what to put in it so they can run as fast as possible across the beach, and that may be all they're carrying with them into their new life. it really gives you a perspective on my own life, you know, and coming back home to Corvallis, my concerns about like, should I drink tap water or filtered water and how much vitamin C to take? It just kind of really puts it in perspective. And I'm a little more able to find joy myself, thanks to their example.
Hard for me to top that answer. That's well put. As far as what, surprised me on arrival, I think we were just prepared to be flexible and to enter a situation that we really didn't know a lot about, and because it's ever-changing situation. And so I think one of the things that surprised us was to arrive at the house with folks who had been there for months, yet we were handed the keys. We were handed the keys to the house, resources, the basement. Rachel's grocery shopping is largely secured in the basement or the cave, down the steep cement steps. And so just to sort out one of our biggest challenges was to sort out living in community with folks, and yet we were the ones with the keys. And so I think that was a challenge at first and a surprise that we needed to sort out. Yet it was our clumsiness with that responsibility was met with such grace and warmth by the guests of the house, and that it didn't really matter that we were so clumsy or awkward with that responsibility. Folks were anxious to engage and to get to know us, and we to get to know them. And so that, we quickly got through that phase, I think. As far as what's stuck with me, I think it's been just what a privilege it was to be in that space and to have that opportunity. It's such a rare opportunity to be living with folks who are willing to, they have a backstory that has driven them to make incredibly difficult decisions for them and their children. And they trusted that portion of their lives to share it with us. And so as I'm back in the comfort of the States and my relatively uneventful day-to-day life, I see the faces of children that make me think of those children that I spent time with and had relationship with. And it's really rich to be able to be reminded and to think of them and to know that the struggle of the other stories I read in the newspaper are not that much different, and just really gives you, it makes you stop and realize that there's always more to the story than you know, and that we as humans long to care for each other and to help where we can. And so Maria Skobtsova House is a wonderful opportunity for us to plug into that possibility.
We're going to pivot to Joseph and Rachel here. And it relates to, this notion of story that you've raised. The story that is often told about mission is that we have something precious or important to take to other people. And as both of your experiences illustrated, what has stuck with you is the ways that you've been transformed by the privilege, Kathy said, of walking alongside these people. So, to Rachel, at the Mennonite Mission Network, we believe that the Spirit beckons us places, and that we go to places to partner with God, but that work of God isn't dependent on us. That's the work of God. God has been in the lives of these women and children long before any of us, and will continue to be. So I'm curious, how do you experience that idea of going and partnering, and also being transformed along the way as both, an active agent, but as a passive receiver at the same time?
Yeah, I think both are very, very clear. Just the whole situation of Calais, as both Barbara and Kathy described, like it's ever changing and you have no control. You have no control. And you're there to walk alongside and support, and to be with people as they're in some of their most difficult moments. And I can't bring anything to that. I know that I'm a completely different person than when we first left the States to come here 2.5 years ago. Just learning and seeing the strength of all the people we've met, and the hundreds of women we've seen. It's very clear that I'm not doing anything, that we're seeing God with us in this house. And, really, I said this just recently, that, we came to be a light in Calais, but also just that voice of you are loved and you are wanted. And I feel like that's what we've been able to say when we see a woman coming back from the beach, completely soaked and wet, walking in the door and just falling in my arms, like, why don't they want me? Why can't I stay here? And be like, I want you. I'm happy you're home. Come home. Come have some tea. Like, even if it's just for a moment and you're going back out again, like, you're here, you're wanted, you're loved.
At the same time, having visited the place, I know there's actually very important good work being done by the both of you. So could you talk about a little bit about your trip to the UK over the fall and what it's like to meet some of these people after they're settled in the UK and how they reflect on their time at the Maria Skobtsova House?
Yeah, no, it's been amazing to see them on that end. Many are still in dingy hotels. Quite a few, we couldn't even go into the place where they were staying. They would come out and meet us, and we'd go to a coffee shop. But the whole time we were there, they'd sit and say, thank you. Like, Calais, we knew Calais was horrible, but because of you guys, it's not horrible. And we had a beautiful experience because of this little house in Calais. I think Joseph can speak more to that too. He specifically had a few conversations with a couple of the guests while we were there.
We hear a lot of negative things about the situation in the UK in terms of how people are treated and accepted, and racism and things like that. But the women, when we go to visit them, the vast majority of them are very happy. And they feel like they've accomplished, well, they have accomplished something. They're at this goal now, and what they've wanted for such a long time. And they always send us messages when they get their papers and things like that. And those are some of the happiest moments that we have. And yeah, so the last time we went back in October, we got to meet a number of the women who have crossed, and just a couple of things specifically that were shared with them. All of them had so much like positive and warm feeling when they talked about the house, and they had so many wonderful things that they remembered. But there are a couple of things specifically that were said to me. One was this woman from Iran who is now settled with her family in the UK. Excuse me. She told me, when we were getting ready to come to Calais, everyone told us Calais was a terrible place, it was going to be awful. But we have nothing but happy memories from Calais because of you and because of the house. And then another man who had stayed there with his pregnant wife while they were in Calais told me, I don't think you understand what you do is such a small thing. It's you go to work at this house and that's what you do with your life. You go to work every day. It's a job for you and all of this. But for us, for those of us who stayed at the house, it's not a small thing at all. I can't even put in words how important this was for us to be there at the house. And yeah, and just hearing those kinds of things is incredibly validating for us in our work, because it is easy to kind of get lost in those dark times and to feel those emotional, depressing moments with the women. But then it just kind of puts into perspective that the work that we do is important for these people that we are able to serve here in Calais. And it does make a difference in their lives in a super positive way. And yeah, that's part of what keeps us going. I definitely would say.
Especially when you think of the number of people that are in Calais and you can only help 12 out of the 500, 1,000, 2,000. but just being just that little part of their story, and letting us be a part of that story has been humbling. And actually just this week, with one of the women that was there, she was giving me a big hug and just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm like, thank you too. Thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Like, you're doing an amazing thing. You're such a strong woman. Thank you for letting us be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to be, when they tell their grandkids the story of their migration someday, we get to be a part of that. And that to me is incredible. So I love that.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about the reality of the crossing. Um, for those who don't know, you don't actually live at the house. You live at an apartment nearby, and workers and volunteers run the house. So there are times when you return, and unbeknownst to you, someone has been called away by their smuggler and is gone. Can you talk about what it's like to live with that kind of contingency, that kind of unknown, the constant danger of the crossing, and the spirituality of that experience?
Actually, it was the first time we had somebody leave. I didn't realize it for a while. It actually took us about 3 weeks to hear from them, which is more uncommon now than it was, I think, back then. But I didn't realize how much of a breath I was holding, that it was like a really physical thing in my body. As soon as we got the news, they texted, "We're in the UK." Like, I audibly let out a breath and tears were rolling down my face. Like, holding them in that space, the unknowing, is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, and I'm sure Barbara and Kathy can speak to this as well, but it's different what we do from other organizations that just see people for a few hours at a time and provide them with different temporary needs and things, because what we do is actually live life with these women. And so they become very close friends, almost family to us. Of course, some more than others, and that's just human nature. But at the same time, like, we develop really close relationships where we get to know people's stories and their dreams and their goals and what they've been through and what they're hoping to accomplish. And so those moments when it's coming the whole time, from the time they come into the house, we know it's coming. The day is coming when they're going to tell us, my smuggler called today, I have a chance, I have to go. And then they just grab all their stuff, or not all their stuff, usually some of their stuff, and put on a backpack, take their kids, whatever, and they go out the door. We say goodbye, and then we can't do anything. We don't know what happens. And those moments, from the very first time that happened until now, it hasn't gotten easier. It's every time somebody leaves, especially somebody that we have a close relationship with, it feels like losing a loved one until you know that they're safe in the UK. And sometimes, most of the time we hear from people that they've arrived, but sometimes we don't, and we just have to hope to God that they're safe, and that they've reached their destination. But then, they'll go out, and the next morning, if they haven't been successful, they'll come back to the house. And Rachel can actually tell you a couple stories about that, if that'd be helpful, like with that woman fainting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they've come back in all sorts of conditions. We've seen women come back with burns. We've had, I think, 6 or 7 in the past 2 years we've been here, come back with really bad chemical burns that result from the mix of the salt in the salt water and the gasoline, the diesel from the motor. When that mix, it causes extreme chemical burns, and we've seen a lot more of that recently. We had a woman with a slight heart condition. She came back and fainted in my arms as soon as she made it in the door. And yeah, but then an hour later, they're cooking, they've had a shower, and they're smiling. And, saying, well, tomorrow's another day, we'll do it again. Or I'll take a little rest now, we're leaving in a few hours. And so you're still kind of holding that, it's going to happen again, but you're holding that. And last year was the deadliest year on the channel, actually.
Nearly 100 people died in the channel last year.
So you're holding that in your mind as you're waiting to hear from them.
And I had the opportunity in maybe it was November. I've been to several funerals for people who've died on the channel, drowned or suffocated or whatever. But last November, I went to a funeral, and it was for a 40-day-old child. And it was a Muslim funeral. The imam came. He was late because he had been held up and asked for his papers by the authorities in Lille because he's not white, essentially. And he made it to the funeral. The mom and dad and the siblings were all there. And I could hear mom crying. I could hear mom crying the whole time. They went to get out this casket, and it was the smallest little casket I've ever seen in my whole life. And they took it over and they put it in the ground. And the Muslim tradition is to bury it while they're there during the funeral. So the men all got around and started throwing dirt into the grave the whole time the mom was crying. And that's not the first funeral for a child that we've been to. Yeah, it's a very, very real, very deadly thing. And up to this point, nobody that we know or care about has been somebody who's died in the channel, but we know it's going to happen eventually. And yeah, and those thoughts honestly do keep me awake some nights.
I'd like to speak to that. When I was there in September, I was just there not even 3 weeks, but there were several shipwrecks during that time. And, by 9 or 10 in the morning, we'll get news of a shipwreck and the death toll. And this is another one of those moments where you feel like the spiritual calisthenics of being there, because anytime folks from our house have gone out, I'm trying to pray, thy will, not mine, be done, but I'm also praying, please God, please let them live, these people I care about. And then when the report of the deaths come in, we're waiting to find out, oh, was it a boatload of men only? Did they leave from a place that's different from the places where we thought our women were leaving from? And then you pause for a second, and it's horrifying to feel how much I'm praying for the death of somebody else, not the people I love. And then the next thing I have to have is forgiveness for myself, that I'm praying for the people I know, and I'm not as good at praying for the people that I don't know. And so again, the situation just helps me see my own places where I have room to grow spiritually.
Thank you all. It's no secret that the U.S. is currently experiencing a massive wave of anti-immigrant sentiment with the new incoming administration. Can you talk a little bit about the political situation in France, what the attitudes toward migrants are, changes that you've seen since you've been there, and how it plays in with this kind of global trend of nation and suspicion of others?
I have to be a little careful about what I say, just by nature of being here and having a visa and stuff. The situation in Calais specifically is very anti-migrant. And the politicians and the members of parliament and the other people who represent this area build a lot of their platform on getting rid of the migrants or keeping the migrants out. And we get mailings about this sometimes. We see signs about this sometimes. We got a magazine a little over a year ago from the local member of parliament, and it talked about making Calais a zero immigrant zone. That was one of his goals, and all of the things they were doing to make that a reality. And in fact, we're immigrants and we're here. We live in France. We're not from here. But for some reason, we've never been asked for our documents. And when we take the train from Lille to Calais, it's the big city, which is about an hour away, the nearest big city to us. Nearly every time I'm on that train, I see the conductors come through, and the people they ask for tickets don't look like me. Yeah, it's quite obvious what's going on there. And so that's specifically here, but broader France, I would say, has a very similar way of thinking about immigration. They have a very similar kind of mindset to what we see in the US, which is immigrants are coming here and they're going to change our culture. They're going to take our jobs. They are really just terrorists who are coming here to destroy our country. Things like this. I hear this stuff. We shared at a Mennonite event a couple of years ago, and afterwards the talk was, some people, not everyone, some people said things like, "Why are you helping the illegals?" And yeah, that's just, that attitude should be very familiar to my American friends. That's very much what we see here in Europe. And unfortunately, I don't see it getting better soon. The House has been under threat by the political forces. They're trying to close down anything that might help or appear to help the migrant population. Thankfully, we're still there, and we're not doing anything illegal. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So the sentiment's very much the same as what we would see in the US. And that's not to say that there's nobody who supports us here, no locals who care. We've met a number of amazing people. There are a number of people in Calais who really care and really do something. In fact, there's this whole network of citoyen hébergement, which is people who open their homes to people from the migrant population for short stays when they need a safe space to be. Those are local Calaisian people. But for every one person who does that, there's someone who supports the initiatives that close down the parks and put up the fences and put rocks out so that people can't set up their tents. You drive around Calais, you see fences all over the place. You see rocks all over the place that were put out where people had been camping before so that they can't set up their tents. And a vast majority of this was funded by money given to the government of France by the British government. So they're kind of exporting their border to Calais. And so, yeah, so the sentiment's not good. And we hear a lot of stories from people about racism and things that they face, even beyond just being a migrant. And yeah, there's a lot more I can say about that, and I'm not going to go on too long, but the sentiment's not great, and I really think that it's not going to get better anytime soon.
While I'm there serving as a volunteer, I trust that Joseph and Rachel and the association are keeping track of these big picture issues that Joseph described. And in the moment when I'm taking kids to the park, other kids are friendly to them. They're loaning our guests their scooters. The parents are supportive of the kids playing together. And if I'm riding the bus and someone asks me, "What are you, an American, doing in Calais?" and I say I'm volunteering at this house, they'll say, "Oh yes, it's terrible what these immigrants, what these people on the move have to go through." So there's a lot of sympathy from the ordinary folks on the street. And I never sensed hostility from people we were interacting with in the neighborhood.
Well, that's good, Barbara. I'm happy to hear that.
Well, similar to here, in our day-to-day lives, we don't necessarily encounter all of the very difficult things that we know are driving our politics and our policies. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like the North American Church in particular to know? How can we pray for you? What are the learnings that you've gained that you want to leave us with?
As I think about the experience in Calais and the small moments of the day that stick with you, I always come back to the kids and the time that we had with the kids. And a couple stories come to mind. One was just, these kids have been out on these tries and attempts to cross multiple times, and you can't imagine a child of 5 or 7 years old or younger and what they're carrying with them. And so as they know they're getting ready to go out in the evening, to be asked by one of your young friends who feels like a family member now to have him say to you, "Can you talk to Jesus for me?" It's just a reminder that they know Jesus is going with them, but they're not quite sure what that looks like or how that feels like or what they have to draw on. And to be asked to join them in that is a humbling and a strong reminder of what faith means. And then I also think of a story that we often tell when we're out of how, again, these children are just loaded with these experiences. And in Calais, there are canals that run through town, and part of the bus system, the public bus system, where you can ride without charge, is a boat that goes up and down the canal. And as we thought about experiences that the kids might enjoy, I never anticipated how difficult it would be to communicate to a 7-year-old that we were going to go on a boat on the canal. And you can imagine the triggers of a boat on the water and what that meant. And it took a day or two of just describing the boat and the canal and what it would be, and we would go with before this 7-year-old consented that, okay, I'm brave enough to go do this. And these kids had grown up and had French as their primary language. And it was amazing to be on the boat with these children as they grilled the conductor with questions. And because it was all in French and it was very, the conductor, you could tell, had school groups or something on before, because they would ask, are there life jackets? How deep is the water? How old is this boat? Has anybody ever drowned? It was a line of questioning that came from experiences that we've never known, and but you knew exactly where it was coming from. And so as we saw that family successfully cross, we thought, well, I hope that experience on a boat had some impact and was some bit of safety and that could be drawn on as they cross a channel. But again, as I live my days in comfort and relative ease and not facing those sorts of difficult decisions, the migrant story is a difficult and challenging one, and it's a privilege to be able to carry bits of their stories with us.
Barbara and Kathy, in fact, took Micaiah, our son, on the boat with them that day as well, which was really wonderful. And Micaiah is 6 and almost 7, and we try to kind of discuss these things in a way that he understands. And so I remember the first time we were going to take the ferry from Calais over to the UK, we told him we were crossing the channel on a boat, and he actually got quite quite scared for a minute because he thought we were going on the same kind of boats that his friends go on. And anytime somebody says that they're going to cross over to the UK now, even if it's another European or whatever, he always asks, "Are you going on a small boat?
Do you have a passport?
Do you have a passport?" And things like this. So it definitely affects our kids, the stories that they hear and the work that they do. And we've even had Elijah cry, our older son, cry a couple times because kids he's grown close to have left. And so, yeah, it deeply affects them as well. And I think it's important for us to remember them as we talk about this and as we pray about this and things like that, because they're exposed to some things as well that most kids just aren't. And and I hope it makes them better, more compassionate people as they grow up. So pray for them, pray for wisdom for us to know the right things to say at the right times.
Thank you, all of you, for your time and for your service in this way, and that it will make us kinder and gentler people as well. Thank you for being a witness to Christ, a piece of the good news of Jesus in the lives of all those that you've touched. And thank you for touching us with your stories.
Thank you for joining us for this second conversation in our Here with Purpose webinar series. Whether you are watching this on your own or with a group, I'd like to encourage you to take a few minutes to reflect on the stories you've heard. Here are a few questions to help guide your reflection. Feel free to pause the video in between each one. What stood out to you in today's conversation? Why? What part of the story shared today was challenging for you to hear? What brought encouragement? We are called to mourn with those who mourn and rejoice with those who rejoice. That is the essence of the Givens work. Where do we experience that in our own lives? How can our mourning and rejoicing partner with those who experience the same, even at a distance? Where do we cultivate relationships with those experiencing such emotions to walk with them? Do we keep the reality of death and human limits before us in our daily living? How might that change how we live? How might it change how we experience God? Thank you again for joining us. In this description of this video, you'll find resources to learn more about the Givens ministry, as well as how to join in and support ministries like theirs around the world. God bless you. See you next time.